Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Community Connections with Ryan Sauers. I'm super excited today to have Everton Blair, my friend and colleague. He is the Gwinnett County Board of Education chairman with us today. Everton, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
You are welcome. You're welcome. And if you've seen any of my shows, there's a common theme, Everton, of me and technology. So that we got worked out, and you stayed cool, calm, and collected and patient. I appreciate it.
No problem. I mean, none of us asked for any of this.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's always bad when you're recording a live show and you get the note internet unstable. That's not what you want to start with, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell us, Everton, I know a lot of people know a lot about you and maybe people don't, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself from your background? I believe you went to Gwinnett County Public Schools. You've taught, and I don't want to put words around you, but you've gone to some of the best schools in the country. But let people know who Everton Blair is.
Yeah. So my family is a family of Jamaican immigrants who came to the Atlanta area in the early 90s, had me and quickly moved to Gwinnett County. I attended Shiloh Elementary, middle, and high school. And really, it was at the time when the county was beginning to explode.
Yeah.
So I experienced a lot of the demographic transition of the county, as well as the population increase from the late 90s to the early 2000s, even through the tens and where we are today. And did really well, had an awesome experience at Shiloh. Had some of the most amazing teachers, many of whom are still teaching at other schools in the district, and just had a ton of opportunities that I saw were really the benefit of my being tagged very early on as a student with promise. And that was the gifted program that was putting me through the accelerated resources, that was teachers believing in me and investing in me. And by the time I had gotten to high school, I had noticed that many of my peers around me, just didn't have those resources, didn't have those opportunities. A lot of that was access, and a lot of that was also like the deep-seated belief in what they could do and their potential. And it bothered me. And so I told the story about like my, orientation around public education was because I felt like we should be doing more. And I wanted to make sure that students, peers, kids like me weren't left behind. And I knew that because of all of the resources and inputs that I got, I was able to thrive. So I wanted to make sure that was a consistent use case for every other student who's experiencing our public infrastructure. Fast forward, that kind of put a little bug in me to figure out what I could do
Right.
as a young person. And, had the privilege of getting accepted to a ton of great schools and went to Harvard for undergrad. And really was not intrigued by like the corporate finance world and path that everybody else is taking. So I chose to come back to Atlanta and teach. I taught high school math on the west side of the city. And I was 21 in way over my head, and I was teaching 12th graders. So you can imagine that my classroom management strategy was not like, I'm the adult and you're not. It was like, hey, do you want to do your homework?
Right.
More of a big brother sibling mentorship dynamic. And it just stuck with me, a transformative teaching experience that led me to pursue a path of education policy. Because even though I felt like I was really impactful as a teacher, I knew that there were so many other factors and prerequisites and variables that happened well before they entered my classroom that I felt like shouldn't be that way. And I felt like adults needed to be doing something earlier and more urgently to make sure that kids of any background had just as many doors open and opportunities to thrive. And so that's the long and short of what led me on the path. And then the story of coming home was just doing all these jobs in DC, New York, and LA, and realizing that like I didn't have that community connection. And that's
a good show name too.
Community connection. I know, right?
we didn't plan that. I like it.
Right. And it brought me back home.
Well, that's what I wanted to have you on. One of my friends is principal right now at Shiloh Elementary, and he talks about a lot of these people have been my wife's an educator. People have been in Gwinnett County schools for many years, and I think for our educators and our kids in particular, and I got 3 different ages of kids. This year for all humans, I mean, it's been unprecedented. I mean, I don't even know what the word to use, but for going from, hey, we have a couple snow days a year to almost 2 something years of kids and educators trying to figure this out. It's unreal. I mean, what words do you even say to that?
Unfortunate, and still a learning experience and an opportunity for us to do better.
Do you think Everton, though, will take, I mean, not just education, we take this time we've learned and apply it to make education, business, everything more productive?
That's my commitment. Honestly, I have been disappointed as a young adult in seeing how reactionary we are to everything, but then we walk away from that and almost forget that the pain and trauma happened and just kind of resume business as usual. My hope is that, given the intense learning experience that we just had and the intense disruption that we all felt, like, we actually do better because of it, and we actually understand what can be, and hold true to some things that we did in the rush to adapt that are just good practice now. Like, you can reach more people if you think more innovatively about how to get to them, and that was something that we had to scrappily figure out over the course of a couple weeks, when everybody was digital overnight and we didn't even know who had laptops and who didn't, and that became our textbook, and it was a huge shift that I'm hopeful coming out of, we understand like a little bit more about the importance of our public infrastructure, the need to really invest in our teachers and support systems, and realize that schools are a vital entity for communities to thrive, and continue to invest resources there.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I'll sit on a couple of school councils or different things such as that. And, sometimes I'm hoping going forward, let's say a schedule makes it undoable to be there in person for my schedule, but I could get on via Zoom, even if I'm in a parking lot somewhere, waiting on my kid. And I think that's, to your point, what you're saying is there's ways we can not only just say, think outside the box, break the box, and say, all right, well, we could bring him in this way and he can still participate.
Yep. Yeah.
And I hope we learn. I mean, I just don't see how with the human brain in 13 months of a traumatic experience, we don't adapt and move forward. Change is always hard, but change is a part of life.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, and we learned a lot this year about just where our students are, and we have some unknowns about where they will be coming back. And so we also need to be proactive in realizing that, there were certain things we couldn't account for because we didn't see it coming. There's a lot that we do see coming. So let's make sure we have the structures in place to address all of the challenges that we know will happen when you bring a whole bunch of people back into a building after a year and a half of chaos.
And that's where I think it's just, it's everybody wants to make a snapshot judgment of XYZ, of what teachers do, or what you've been a teacher, you've been an educator, that experience you just shared of being 21 and, hey, you guys want to do your homework? Every teacher, for one of my magazines, I've got a writer writing about first-year teachers in Gwinnett County Public Schools, what it was like to be a first-year teacher. Fascinating. I haven't even read it yet, but they're being asked, and kids are being asked to do things. And I do think that we've never done before. And I do think you're right. You're going to have almost a year and a half, at least, of time for people to adapt back to what that's going to look like. And I don't think you just go like that and go, all right, you're not even used to having that many people in a building together.
Right. And so things won't be 100% back to normal to that point, right? We don't even know if the vaccine will be available to students under 16. We like what sort of social distancing and CDC protocols we will maintain. There's a whole set of unknowns that I think we still need to be mindful of, because school will not be like it was in 2019.
No, and I worry. It's a tough bag. I've taught online classes, I've taken online classes, I've taken on ground classes in all my levels. I'm to my dissertation in leadership. But the human connection of being part of this is going to be weird for people coming back, because we've had masks, we've had 6 feet apart. We call it social distancing, but it's really physically distancing.
Yeah.
It's
demoralizing too.
It is. I mean, you and I are getting a smile through the screen. That's as close as we get.
I know.
But it's you think about it, Everton. You probably got kids in kindergarten or first grade that are really going, hey, am I allowed to give a stranger a hug? Or who are my grandparents? I haven't only seen them on the phone.
Yeah.
And so I think what I'm trying to say is, even we get to next fall, there's going to be curveballs, changes, and some people are going to say, we don't get it. But the plan is we got a plan. There's going to be more change, and hopefully we can just grow from what we've learned. But no, there's going to be curveballs we don't expect.
Yeah, yeah. There have been a lot of reflections for me along those lines, and just how much of an extrovert I am and how much I miss just people and their interactions. I can only imagine our students are longing for and craving their built-in everyday experience that they used to have socially in many cases. And the reality is also that some students thrived in the digital setting. So we have to be mindful of, it was not a monolithic experience for every single person in our community. It also will not be a monolithic experience when we return. And so when one size doesn't fit all, you try to do as much as you can for as many people as you can. And that's where I think we need to focus on really making sure our next year is impactful.
I agree. I agree. Well, have you seen, what advice would you give? I mean, this could be any sector, to a business person listening. This becomes a podcast later, for a teacher, for an educator, for a nonprofit that is saying, is this ever going to come to an end? How do I, we've talked about pivoting and the new normal so many times that I say, we've pivoted in basketball and pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. And the new normal, what does that even mean? I think we're in a normal that's going to continue to change. What do you tell those people that are just weary? They don't see the finish line. They're like, is this ever going to stop? Are we ever going to be back towards, missing seeing people? What do you say to them?
I say, if anything, we've understood that we have the capacity to do some outstanding and never seen before or experienced before things when we exert the willpower to do so. And if you think about like living in a world where we are giving people $1,400 checks, like what if you had said that 4 years ago, people would have laughed at you, right? Or experiencing a place where you can actually give folks laptops and hotspots in order to, like, there's so much sharp transition that we made because we said, this is what we need, this is what people need, we're going to do it all to make it happen. And that was, I think, a wake-up call for folks about like the power of these institutions that we start voting people into and, wielding public resources in order to provision, when people have been clamoring for so long for certain things in their pay or in their employer experience or in their student supports. Like, we can actually do those things. It's just a matter of how much we're willing to envision it and commit the hard work and the nitty-gritty details under the hood to make sure that we do it.
Yeah, and it's kind of bad. It's like going back to 9/11 or other things. It takes a tragedy or pandemic or whatever for people to say, we got to pull together and pull together. You're right. I think there was a couple of weeks and there was no real game plan. I mean, there was no game plan for, we're going to shut schools down and no one had a crystal ball. Yeah. And so it's easy. I think it's easy for human beings to sit in the sidelines and take pot shots about, well, I don't know why we're doing this, but until you're in the seat with all the information, it's easy to judge, but it's harder to make a decision when things are changing. Am I right?
Right. I mean, that was my position the entire time. I never wanted to be in a situation where I was being declarative about something that, number one, I'm not an expert in, I'm not an epidemiologist. And right. Two, that was constantly in flux, and new science is coming out as we make new decisions the entire time. And so the context will continue to change. And I think we do have to be amenable to that reality.
Yeah, I do. And, human beings, this, are reluctant to change. You can have a classroom and if you allow people, like when I do college teaching, they all sit in the exact same seat every week. So like the week 3, I always come in and go, everybody switch. They don't like that. That's uncomfortable. So when you get faced with something like this, there was no choice but to adapt. And I'm saying that about the future because as we go into the fall of 2021, like you said, there's going to be more unknowns. But you nor I or anybody can predict exactly what that's going to look like.
Yeah. And it is scary. I think one of the things that has been revealed to me is just how comfortable people are with status quo, and how frightening it is for that to be disrupted. And I relate to that. And at the same time, we have to recognize that like things have already changed. So right. If we don't change, if we don't adapt, we're actually never going to be able to deliver toward what we all need in order to get to the new context that we're about to assume. And that's where I think we need to go.
Yeah, and just you use the word deliver, and it got me thinking. Think about how quickly we've adapted to, if you go to Grubhub or DoorDash or whatever, you used to have to go to the door. You're like, man, I'll just wait a minute or two, right? That's become our new and it's kind of convenient. They ring your doorbell and they walk off, and it's just different, but it's become normal. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So, what do you see down the road, just in general, with education and a national sphere that's got to happen? I mean, we've got a mammoth millennial group, and we've got a mammoth Gen Z, and Gen Z is obviously the ones. A lot of people get this. I know, but a lot of people get this confused. But Gen Z, right in the midst of their formative years, some of them beginning college, many of them K through 12, and probably going to look a little different than millennials. So that's how generations work. But what do you think some of our pressing things we have to do, not just here in Gwinnett, but across the country, to make sure we're not just talking about a pandemic, we're looking at the next 10 years?
Oof,
that's a big question. Yeah.
Really important one. I mean, I see this often as, what are we doing to make sure that the younger generations have as many opportunities to live high quality and fruitful lives as their predecessors did? And a lot of that is like stuff well beyond the public schools, right? It's like access to high quality jobs and, not letting automation put us all in unemployment situations. But it's also like giving our young people the skills in an expansive information-based, technology-based economy so that they can create meaningful work themselves. And that's where I think we have a really powerful opportunity in our high schools to deepen our work in the career and technical education pathways, and to expand some of our workforce-based pipelines, to make sure students understand at an early age and get the exposure to realize how what they're learning in school today can apply to really important jobs and opportunities later on. I think there's a huge marriage right now between the job opportunities that we're seeing in Gwinnett County, even where there is just a dearth of talent around certain critical areas, and then we can be backtracking that to figure out like what we need to do to invest in the training so that students can take advantage of those opportunities earlier.
Yeah, spot on. You just said it earlier. You said, I think you were at Harvard, and you said, hey, the business track wasn't my thing, right? And so for everybody, college, four-year university is not going to be their thing, and they need to know, if you're just going to go to college just because you're supposed to, maybe that's not the road for you. Maybe it's a tech school. Maybe it's going to the workforce. But and just a couple of speeches I've given, just helping schools out, this entrepreneurial thing of what it looks like is, I think, an opportunity, because people say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't want there to be any risk. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. But you know what I'm saying? And I just think everything about education can possibly be rethought. I was taking a class one time, Everton, and they were saying, the reason we have school bells, it kind of goes back to the days of, where you used to have like the mine workers or bells or whatever. Everything was, we got fifth grade learners with fifth grade learners. But what if a fifth grade math student is excellent and can work with eighth grade people? So that, and they're just like, well, that'd be different or weird. And is it, or is it just, our limited thinking and not, with the growth mindset?
I mean, it's our restraints are around what's convenient for the adults to do. And oftentimes that comes at the expense of what is best for kids to explore and experience. And so to that point, right, it's harder to schedule, and tracking's easy because you can treat all kids of a certain age like they're the same. And then maybe you'll create like some mini categories, and you'll put this kid in this bucket and this kid in that bucket, and then just keep them on those paths. But that does a disservice to them in the long run. And if we realize that there are going to be more opportunities afforded to certain groups, then the equity provision needs to be to make sure that everybody has access, and that we're pushing and accelerating the group that needs more, while at the same time allowing all groups to thrive.
Well, and one of the principals said something to me one time a few years ago, and he said, we're in the business of educating students and bettering their lives for the future. I mean, everything else and every policy, that's our goal, and, to take care of them, to mold them, to expose them to stuff. And I think what I want to say is, when you were saying there's a disconnect to a certain degree between, any education. I mean, I see this with college people getting their adult, going back to school to get a four-year degree, and application. They're like, okay, I'm getting this degree in leadership, but I don't know what to do. I'm like, here, it's got to intersect, and that's really important to me. I'm passionate about it, because learning without application is just, it doesn't get exciting, right?
Yeah, and you end up in a lot of debt.
Amen. Exactly right. Well, let me ask you a question. Since we entered this pandemic, and I'm looking to see when somebody's going to say we get to the end of the pandemic, but what's the best piece of advice somebody's given you when just thinking about this time, or maybe something you've reflected on a lot over this time?
Oof. I mean, on a personal note, like I think I have realized how unnecessarily busy we were,
Yeah.
and how important it was to kind of take a step back and appreciate what you have. And that's from anything as simple as just maybe you don't need to be traveling as much, or booking your schedule from start to finish, sun up to sundown, and maybe you could just sit on the deck, or walk outside and just take a little break and experience nature. And
Right.
I've been super appreciative of the opportunities to um, relax and recharge, and that's been really important for me. I also think, like, coming into this, we realized how much time we were misusing, and how much we might have been able to not have that be a coffee, but just an email.
Right. Right.
Or maybe that event like didn't actually need to take place without first doing the online survey. And because of the pandemic, we realized that we can gather input more effectively in one way to then make the in-person interactive experience much more meaningful. So for me, it's just been trying to see the good and the silver lining in everything, even tragedy, and picking up on scheduling myself so that I'm able to do some of that when things do get back to the crazy sun up sundown schedules and ripping and running in traffic all the time, and trying to avoid some of that once where I can.
It's funny. The last speech I gave, I had to think about this the other day. I gave it in Las Vegas in February of 2020, and it was on human to human, the importance of the human to human touch. Funny enough. And, I began the speech and people were saying, we're so slammed and buried and busy and drowning. And so I said, we didn't have time until we did. And, what you just said is what, we finally got the time to take a step back, and hopefully we'll learn from that and use that in all of our capacities going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And people need public places. I can't remember how excited I was when Stone Mountain Park opened back up. And I was just like, just something, just
something.
Yeah, just anything. And we slowly began to kind of ease on the safest outdoor places. And I was relieved at how much those spaces, I think, afforded some of us the just option to be whole and take advantage of place. And then same thing with our public schools. Like, it was heartbreaking for all of us when we needed to, for the safety of our staff and students and families, not allow people to congregate in our buildings. But we didn't like having to do that. And we love the fact that our schools serve that critical function in bringing people together and educating young folks. But, it's important that we take away from this how much we need those places.
They're so important. And I'll never forget, I'm a big sports fan. And when sports just ended, the first thing I remember doing is, Michael Jordan and the Bulls have a documentary. It was like watching live TV in the old days. But yeah, it was crazy, and you just had to take a step back. But we are going to come to the other side of it. And I know you and the Gwinnett County Board are working diligently to foresee the fall. But as we've said earlier, there are going to be those curveballs, and we don't know how all this, spikes and this stuff are going to go. We see trends. I'm very hopeful. Mm-hmm. But I don't, nor you know exactly what it's going to be. So we're for saying what people are probably going to jump out there to go, why didn't we do this? Or why didn't we do that? Because we're doing right with the data you have at the moment.
Right. Right. And I mean, we've got awesome leaders. I think the benefit is, nothing rises and falls with just one person. And we have 22,000 incredible employees in the system, incredible principals holding structures where our students are actually going. And so I remind folks that the investment that we're making for our teachers, for the people that are in the building, for the folks that are doing the work every day, and the interactions that you're having with those people, that's where we need to focus our energy right now. And that's where I think the more that we can support and hear from them, invest deeply in what they're saying they need in order to do their jobs well when we come back into a more normal environment, I think the better off we'll be to actually have it be a success.
I think it's spot on. And if we get Dean here, I think what you just said, Everton, is so important, to give people that are on the front line an opportunity to truly say what's going on, not to say what you want, here's what I think, but I'm not going to let it down. Because to create change, we got to have real facts. You got to what's really happening. Do we really need hotspots? And the answer was yes. And so you can't do your job even if you want to change, you can't do your job in anything in life unless you have the proper tools. And to have the proper tools, you've got to be able to open up and know somebody has your best interest when they're asking you those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And believe in the folks that are doing the work.
Right. And believe in, they want to know, I know any company I've ever run, they want to know you have their best interest and have their back, and when I'm not saying you, but, they want to know that, hey, it might not always be smooth sailing, but I'm looking for the good and the best possible ways we can. Yeah. Let me ask you this. So one fun question, you mentioned a little bit, what's one positive or something secret you've loved about the challenging time? You're an extrovert, I'm an extrovert, but is it that time to take those walks or be away that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, I actually did. And I mean, I think I still found ways to engage. I mean, as much as I'm tired of Zoom, I'm thankful that it was there when I needed it. And now I think we're getting to a place where I can comfortably hang out with vaccinated friends and be more out and open. And so I'm in a place now where I've just appreciated the technology that allowed this to be a little bit better than I presume it was in 1919 during the Spanish flu.
Exactly.
And then, also realizing that when we come back, we all are appreciative of our public health infrastructure. I don't know how many times I went to the GNR Health website, but I took it for granted before. And we got hardworking people that are spending time understanding community spread every day there, and I have a deep appreciation for them and all the work that they're doing over there. And I think that we wouldn't have been recognizing them in the way that we are right now had it not been for the pandemic.
I agree. And, it's exactly, I think one of my friends I interviewed on one show one time, he had it. I mean, you might've heard this before. He's like, dude, I've done so many of these, I feel like a zombie. And I said, okay, I hear that. That's a new one for me, but yeah, I'm going to continue this. I'm going to do 2 different shows, this particular show through Zoom, because it's easier to get people on quickly, assuming you got technology, but moving forward with in-studio things again as well, because I as much as I enjoy here, I'd rather give you a big handshake, in person, and we're getting there. So we'll kind of come to the end. Again, if you're joining us now on the podcast or video form, we got Everton Blair, who's Gwinnett County Board of Education chairman, with us. Everton, what final words as we talk about education or moving forward, just in general, that I didn't cover, you didn't get a chance to say, that you'd like to say as we kind of come to a close here?
I'm just really excited about where we're going. And I know that we had incredible challenges in the last year, but I think we have an important opportunity to bring forward new leadership in this next year, and to really dig into the issues that our community is wrestling with. And that's, I think, going to be what sets us apart in this next chapter for where we need to go and how we can really address those needs. And it's going to begin with the people that we have on the front lines every day that are direct service to our students and communities. And that's where I'm excited to just be continuing to grow, learn, and listen.
Yeah, and I want to say this just for the record. I always say this, I have a great appreciation of the past, a dedication of the present, and a vision for the future. So I appreciate everything the leadership's been done in the past, where we are right now, and I'm excited, like you said, about the future. And I think if everybody can just remember those things, then we can all, like you said, like in those first 2 weeks figuring it out, come and work hard and help our staff and our students and our whole world. It's just one community at a time. That's why I call this show Community Connections. So I appreciate your leadership, Everton. Appreciate your time, and appreciate you coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
All right, I'm gonna close this down. Okay, we've had Everton Blair. He's Gwinnett County Board of Education. He's the chairman. Everton, again, thanks for your time, and we will see you folks next time on another Community Connections. Take care.